Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. Thank you to TR Sun for their song All Good on today's episode. If you would like to follow along, or if you're like me and seeing the lyrics make listening to music more accessible to you, then check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. Now on to today's episode. Meg Eden Kuyatt joins us to discuss generational trauma, writing poetry, and her new book, The Girl on the Walls. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Meg, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
I'd love to start off by learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
For a long time, I didn't know I was autistic, which is funny now looking at the paperwork for when I was a kid. I showed all the signs. I lost speech acquisition. I regained it. They thought I had a hearing problem. That's what it was like being a girl in the 90s, undiagnosed. So for a long time, I didn't know that the word autistic could apply to me. I had a lot of cultural misconceptions of a very limited perspective of what that looked like. But in college, I started reading autistic coded books and going, oh my gosh, someone else thinks the way I do. This is not just me. I was always labeled like quirky or goes to the beat of her own drum, things like that. So I always prided myself in difference. Yeah, starting in college, early adulthood, I started going, I don't seem to, it's a little bit more than just quirky. There's something where I can't keep up with neurotypicals and what is up with that. And so starting to learn words like neurodivergent, autistic, and going, oh, wow, that really does connect with how my brain works. That connects with how I work. That makes so many things make sense that did not make sense for a long time. So in the past few years, maybe the past 5-7 years, I think Instagram, ironically, was a very helpful entrance into the autistic community, just following autistic influencers and just learning so much from them, because unfortunately, a lot of the medical community and things cannot always be as helpful as I would like them to be.
I'm wondering about some of those autistic coded books. Do you remember anyone in particular that really resonated with you?
Well, so the very first one, I'm reluctant to name it because I think when I think now if I looked back at it, I think I would see a lot of problematic things about it. So it's not that I necessarily want to support that book, but I think I was just so hungry for representation that even problematic representation, which was a lot of my early exposure to the autistic stuff, because I don't even want to say community or identity, because I'm not often those were written by people outside of the community, they're observers. But I was so hungry for representation that even that I was going, oh my goodness, there's something here that I connect with. So now I tend to be I really want to just support autistic authors, books by autistic people from their lived experience versus something from an outsider.
Now, talking about books, on May 20th, your new book, The Girl on the Walls, will be released, which is a chilling lyrical novel in verse about a neurodivergent girl named V, who is sent to her grandmother's house during the summer after a hard school year, which I'm sure many of our listeners could empathize with, the hard school year. What do you want our listeners to know about The Girl on the Walls?
Yeah, so I want you to know first off that the whole cast is neurodivergent. That's special to me because I don't see many stories where that's the case. It's a story about the generational trauma that can come from masking for generations, and the complexity of neurodivergence, and the complexity of how it can manifest, how it can present, how we can all have this thing in common, but all treat it in really different ways. And sometimes people are neurodivergent. We don't realize it. Sometimes the people that get under my skin most are the ones that have a brain that's related to mine. And so sometimes we have competing access needs. Sometimes we just present really differently. And so listening, asking questions, trying to be well, what if this person's doing this upsetting thing? Because actually there's the story behind what they're doing. Maybe they were taught at a young age that what they needed was unacceptable and that the only way you're going to experience love is to be masked. And asking those what ifs and how, especially older generations, may have responded to ableist environments, not having the same tools that maybe we have a little bit more access to now.
Asking questions, curiosity over judgment, I think is always a good way to go about in communication.
Absolutely.
In your book, V finds a ghostly girl hiding in the walls and seems to have an immediate connection with the ghost. Whether it's a ghost or human, what are some things that are maybe helpful to you in developing a connection with others?
So I always try to look for common ground, and the easiest, quickest way is a special interest. So if somebody else shares that special interest, especially as a kid, I think my mom, she said there was an age where she got really concerned with me because if somebody didn't like Pokemon, I was just like, I'm not talking to you. Like it doesn't matter. You don't share the super important thing with me. So that's always helpful. But I think. And I think I've tended towards that black and white thinking. I think that can be easy for us to fall into black and white thinking and have to push a little bit more. So I'm challenging myself that connections maybe aren't always obvious. So maybe they're not a nerd. Maybe they don't like Pokemon. Maybe they don't like the same kind of books or manga that I do, but that there's probably a place of commonality. And maybe I need to be more creative and ask more questions to kind of find that commonality. And I think somebody else, it's also, I think it, even if we don't share a common interest, if they're willing to reciprocate that, ask questions, listen, and we can have a two-way street. That's a big deal. It's a lot harder if you're putting all the work in and the other person isn't.
How dare someone not like Pokemon?
Right. Thank you.
I, a very quick story about Pokemon. I'm here in Cleveland, Ohio, and my nephew lives out of state, so I don't see him that much. But I became a hero to him because there is a specific store in Cleveland that only sells Pokemon stuff. And so when he comes into town, I introduced him to this store, and he thinks it's just the coolest place ever.
That's awesome.
Now, The Girl in the Walls isn't your first book, as you wrote Good Different, which is a girl's journey as she learns that she's on the autism spectrum and comes to embrace herself through this understanding. What do you think might be some key things for girls and women to learn when they come to the understanding that they're autistic in an effort to have a better relationship with themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's multiple things. I'm going to try to remember everything that I want to say about that. One is this really applies to any gender, but particularly for women, I think kindness to yourself and the idea that you might present in ways that's not expected, that's not what we typically talk about. I think especially girls and women tend to be raised with the idea of you need to be convenient and you need to be polite, not be in the way. And so often when I've encountered challenges, I thought, well, I need to try harder. I'm not allowed to ask for things because then that might be rude or inconvenient. And so I think I'm constantly having to combat that mindset. You're able to be thoughtful and considerate to others while also being thoughtful and considerate for your own needs and advocating for your needs. Those two things don't have to be separate, but often I think we can feel like, especially if that was what was modeled to us, that those things are separate. So particularly having to kind of be kind to yourself and say, like, it's okay to ask for things. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay if how I present is different. It's okay if I have masked and I'm not really even aware. The mask has kind of become fused to my face and I might need a little bit more time to get to know myself. Those things are all fine. And that's why I really love writing, and especially writing poems, because they allow me to slow down in an overwhelming neurotypical world and go, okay, what's really going on here? I just had a meltdown, or I'm nonverbal. I'm feeling something really big. Why am I feeling this big thing? What's really going on? Because I didn't grow up with the language of knowing any of this stuff. So I'm still having to kind of figure out a lot of things, and poetry gives me that space to breathe and kind of unpack a little bit more what's happening.
Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but The Girl on the Walls is being released in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm wondering what you see as the impact of writing and storytelling in relation to mental health awareness?
Yeah, so I think one thing is representation. So my favorite thing about writing these books is going to a school visit and somebody says, "I'm autistic." And that's like their question, They just say, "I'm autistic." And I'm like, "That's awesome. Like we're brain cousins. That's really cool." And kids being able to say like, "I'm Selah." And hearing about kids bringing this book to their parents and saying like, "This is me. This is the stuff I need." And those parents going, "Oh, okay." And them getting a diagnosis, and how a story can be that entrance into conversations that are complicated. And we probably don't have words for them if we've been masking or we weren't really taught what autism really was. So there's that. And I think The Girl in the Walls, because it's got this intergenerational component, I think it's also a great conversation opener for people before us that maybe have had mental health needs that were overlooked. And maybe that opening the doors actually already with an early reader. I shared it with a friend and she said, "I think my dad's maybe finally coming to terms with being autistic from reading this book." And so I think that's really cool that these books allow for that. But I think also, yeah, it opens for conversations. Yeah, I feel like I was going to say something else about representation and mental health, and now I think that's kind of escaped me. So we'll just say about that as a conversation opener. I think that that's really, really important, and maybe also for people that these aren't their needs, to be able to have more empathy for people that have these needs, and maybe better understanding instead of assumptions.
Because there's so much power and I think learning in storytelling.
Absolutely.
Now, I read when you aren't writing, you're probably playing Fire Emblem or another tactics game. So, what is it about tactics games that are so enriching in your life?
Yeah, I love that. I think as an autistic person, I especially love these tactic games where you can slow down. You don't have to make, like, I hate real time things. I'm like, I can't think in real time. I can't make decisions in real time. I freak out. I'll watch someone else. I'll do a let's play, like watch a let's play of somebody doing that. But most tactics games that I play are turn based. And so I can really think about my moves. I can try them and go, "Ooh, I don't like that." I can go backwards. And that's really cathartic, especially after difficult days where I think, "Oh, gee, like maybe now my head's finally catching up with the moment and going, oh, gee, I wish I had done that, or I should have said this." So I love that about them. And I love about Fire Emblem games is they're war strategy games. And so in every encounter, you're starting a battle with this overwhelming opponent. And every battle you think, how on earth is my tiny army going to beat that thing? And that's how it feels being an autistic person in a neurotypical world. Everything's overwhelming to me. There's people, they're unpredictable, they make noise, they might get in my personal space, they might throw off my nervous system and make me feel like I'm threatened, doing things that they think are totally normal and harmless. So every day feels kind of overwhelming and big. What I love is that I play Fire Emblem, and by the end of the battle, I beat everyone. So, like, it shows me that even an overwhelming circumstance can be overcome, and it might take time, but you take one piece of it at a time and you overcome that, and eventually you'll finish the battle. And so I tend to do that. I tend to take breaks in the middle of the day when I'm starting to feel tired and overwhelmed to play something like Fire Emblem. And I go, "You know what? It's going to be okay. We were able to beat that map. We were able to get through that war. We're going to be able to get through the day too."
I love all of that. I think anything that allows me to slow down, I'm a fan of. And I definitely can see how maybe the decision making within these tactics games could potentially lead to helping with decision making in real life.
Absolutely.
And lastly, Meg, how can our listeners learn more about The Girl on the Walls and purchase a copy or many copies?
Thank you. So The Girl on the Walls comes out May 20th. So you can pre-order it now with your favorite bookstore or online bookseller. And you can learn more on my website, megedenbooks.com. And I always like to recommend your local bookstore. Let them know that you're interested in it. They'll definitely be able to help you. But, bookshop.org also has it and things like that.
Well, Meg, it was absolute pleasure to talk to you. You were delightful, and I'm just so thankful I had the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug. This was great. Thank you for your great questions.
Thanks so much to Meg for the conversation. To learn more about Meg, The Girl on the Walls, and all of her writing, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode regarding what are some of your favorite stories with neurodivergent characters. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching and community groups. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for our autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.